I'm here to talk about love and what works in relationships. And we're not going to focus on a particular type of relationship. Obviously, there's the relationships with your parents, your relationships with your children, relationships with your friends and peers and coworkers, and then there's the love relationships that we have that are in the category of eros, erotic love relationships, in which we have a sexual relationship with another human being. Those are the relationships in which people have the most problems, and so we're going to focus on what is it that are some of the issues that are inherent in that type of a relationship, so that you can come to a more complete understanding of what's going on in your relationship, what's going on in the relationships of the people around you that you may see struggling or even suffering in their personal and private relationships. Of course, those are the relationships that nobody wants to talk about. And yet they're dying inside. They're dying to talk about it. They're dying to share things with other human beings, because it is one of our most profound and intimate drives of a human being, is to be known and recognized and considered valuable by other human beings. It is a fundamental drive that we all have, and unless you feel valued as a human being, unless you feel that you have something to contribute that actually makes a difference, that moves, that touches, that inspires other human beings, your life will feel empty. And to that extent, to the extent that your life feels empty, that you feel hollow inside, like there's no substance or meaning or use for you, then to that same extent, you will be driven. You will be driven by this desire to feel valued, to feel acknowledged, to feel loved. You will be driven to find your fulfillment in other human beings. You'll be subconsciously and automatically, like a drive, like a compulsion, like an animal need, you will look to other human beings to fulfill what you have not been able to fulfill for yourself. In other words, your emptiness, your inner emptiness, your inner lack of love and lack of self-value will drive you in your behaviors to constantly seek out approval from other people, to seek out approval, to seek out being valued, being loved, and so you will wander the earth with this unanswerable question, something like, do you love me now? How about now? Will you love me now? If I do this, will you love me? How about if I do this, then do you love me? And no matter how much you are loved, no matter how much you're acknowledged and valued by other human beings, and you will be, no matter how much value you bring to the world, if your unanswerable question is, do you love me now? No amount of love, no amount of acknowledgement will ever fill the emptiness inside, because only you can fulfill that emptiness. So we find ourselves being raised by our parents who they themselves felt empty inside very often. I'm not saying your parents did, but more than likely they were raised by people who perhaps felt empty inside. And so through the generations, this sort of emptiness that is dependent upon other people to fulfill our emptiness gets passed down as a system of relating to each other. And it has, over time, over generations and generations and generations, a model of relationship has come to be known as love. And they call that love. Like if the words, I need you to feel complete, are a part of your vocabulary, if I need you or I need your love, is a part of your general makeup. It's part of who you are. In other words, you find yourself saying these words, then I propose that there is an emptiness inside that only you can fulfill, and when you fill that emptiness, you will have love to give, and while you would prefer to be loved by others, it will be a preference and not a need. It will be a preference. I mean, certainly somebody who is self-fulfilled prefers to be loved, prefers to share their life with others. And because they are making a contribution to the world, because they love themselves and they are self-fulfilled, they will be loved by others in a very unique and wonderful way that doesn't include neediness, that doesn't include this hungry longing to be fulfilled by another human being. It'll simply be, this is who I am, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I have to offer and to contribute. I'm happy, I'm well, thank you very much, and I love you. And that's what will a person who is self-fulfilled brings to the world, brings to their relationship, brings to others. And so, of course, it's easy to love a person like that because they're not needing you. And so very often, we fall into an addictive system of loving, a codependent and addictive system of loving. And I want to, I began to do this in another show. I want to distinguish what I mean when I use the word addictive or addict. Addictive is any system, because there's no addict without an addictive system. Addicts can only exist inside of a system of addiction, inside of and in relationship to other addicts. So an addiction is anything, any process over which you are powerless. Anything that's going on, a mental process, an emotional process, a physical process, even if it's something like overeating or gambling, that's a process, you see. There's a time when you're not gambling, and then there's a time when you think about gambling, and then there's a time when you go do whatever it is you need to go do, whether it's drive in your car or buy something or sit down at a certain place and start doing that activity. There is a process that one goes through just to fulfill that activity. If you're a sex addict, then there's certain steps that you take to make sure that that addiction gets, that you get your hit, that you get your whatever it is that stimulates you, so that you can have that moment where there is a momentary absence of the pain and longing. A momentary absence of pain and longing, and you call that, if it's love addiction, if it's sex addiction, you call that happiness, you call that love, you call that well-being. And of course, for those of us who have ever experienced that type of thing, it is always temporary. And when I say those of us, I want to be very, very clear that regardless of who you are, if you're watching this show or if you're seeing it 10 years after it was videoed, I've never met a human being that wasn't addicted to something. You are addicted to something. So whether it's, and by addiction, I'm going to just keep distinguishing it so that you can begin to see it for yourself. Any process over which you're powerless, or any substance over which you are powerless, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, coffee. I'm a coffee addict, right? If I don't have coffee, I'm not well. Now, am I powerless? No, not really, not necessarily. However, I don't feel very well if I don't have my coffee, you see. And so that's an addiction. It's an addiction. It becomes progressively more compulsive and obsessive. In other words, you don't even think about it. You just know that today you're going to go do that thing, whatever that is your process or substance. You wouldn't think of not having it. So it's compulsive and it's somewhat obsessive. Like if I remember when I used to smoke, and I knew where every place was that you could get cigarettes. I always knew where I could get a cigarette. So once I let go of that addiction, I don't have that anymore, thank God, I don't even notice it. Now it's kind of unusual to be at a place where there's a lot of people smoking, for example. I just tend to avoid those kind of places. The other thing about addiction is that it takes over and it causes us to do things and to think things. It'll take over your thinking and your actions and behavior so that you will think and do things that are inconsistent with your own values. That are inconsistent with your own values. So you may say, well, I really value being healthy and trim and looking good in my clothes. However, you will sneak over to the icebox in the middle of the night and eat that chocolate cake or eat extra servings of things. So it would be inconsistent with what you say you value. So you'll have your value over here and then this behavior over here, and they don't match. They'll never match up. So the other thing is that that's essential about addictions is that it masks your true feelings. It hides your true feelings. So if it doesn't do that, if it doesn't have you have a moment of temporary relief from your emptiness and your pain and suffering, that is your own private world, if it doesn't have that, you wouldn't do it. If it doesn't give you that true feeling, that momentary relief from your true feelings, and if it doesn't give you, which is basically a confused perception. In other words, you're still feeling that, you just don't feel it for a moment, or you feel something different. So addictions will always give you a confused perspective of the world. So some of the characteristics of addictive thinking, when we talk about confused perceptions, is basically dishonesty. You're dishonest with yourself and others. Self-centeredness. In other words, all you care about is getting your hit of whatever that is. A dependency. In other words, you're dependent not only on that thing that you're addicted to, but other people. You become dependent, and there's a constant seeking because you feel out of control with your life. You know that in fact you're dishonest, self-centered, and dependent, so you try to control other people and other things. So there's a sense of always trying to control something. So these are some of the signs and characteristics of addictive thinking. Now, I notice that some people are beginning to call on the line, so I'm going to go ahead and take this call. Is this call for me?